Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about linguistic diversity in education. This is a chapter by Ingrid Pillar from her book Linguistic Diversity and Social Justice. And we'll see how our linguistic diversity in the school system makes us face social injustice. The first thing Ingrid Pillar talks about at the beginning of the chapter is that people or children and youths who are linguistically diverse, who speak a different language other than the mainstream language spoken in the school, or who speak a different variety of the mainstream language. These children and young adults really face some injustices. And it is the injustice of the quality of education that they receive or the outcomes they have after finishing the schools. Ingrid Pillar says today more children than ever before enroll in formal schools. That's a good thing. And schools play a key role in facilitating life chances of linguistically diverse population. We believe that if we attend schools, we will have a better life. The point is 40% of the primary school children in the world leave the school without having learned the basics of reading and mathematics. And that's a problem. So Ingrid Pillar is saying that language is at the basis of this disparate outcome at the end of their school life. So, and we need to talk about that. Why the children with linguistic diversity are not achieving the learning outcomes the school have set themselves up for. So Ingrid Pillar identifies one major reason for the linguistically diverse children's underperformance in schools. That is monolingual habitus of multilingual schools. Even though the schools are multilinguals with a lot of students who speak multiple languages or multiple varieties of the nationally dominant language, the school system has maintained an environment of monolingualism. And there's a reason for that. Ingrid Pillar says the schools have a kind of hidden curriculum. They serve the needs of the state and the industry to prepare some faithful patriots, obedient soldiers, or docile workers. And they do so by suppressing linguistic diversity and by emphasizing the idea that the standard variety of the dominant language is the only legitimate form of linguistic expression, that anything that is beyond standard or what is called proper is problematic. So that's the problem. And school system this way explicitly aim at eradicating the indigenous languages, the languages that are spoken by the non-dominant population in a particular country. And the schools has maintained this monolingual environment in those multilingual schools for quite some time, even despite the fact that there are more students who are linguistically diverse in the school system now than ever. So the writer comes up with a specific case of this educational underperformance for linguistically diverse children in a country called Romania, and it is particularly focused on ZK land, where there is this monolingual habitus despite the multilingual student population. Ingrid Pillar is talking about the educational underperformance of the linguistically diverse children in ZK land, Romania, because of the monolingual habitus in the school system. Now, ZK land is a Romanian territory with the majority Hungarian population, but their children are underperforming in schools despite legal protection. You know, Romania is part of the European Union, and constitutionally they are bound to serve the needs of the minorities in there, including the linguistic minorities. So they face these Hungarian-speaking children in Romania face two kinds of hurdles in their educational performance, really. The first one is that when they learn things in Hungarian as a medium of instruction for the vocational schools or the mainstream educational system, they face a lot of issues, like they do not have a lot of qualified teachers, they do not have access to appropriate teaching materials, or they do not even have specialized dictionaries. Now, learning things in Hungarian as a medium of instruction is difficult there, but Hungarian is a language spoken nationally in the neighboring country of Hungary. Now, the country of Romania will not collaborate with the neighboring country because of a slogan for educational sovereignty. Now, Hungary and Romania are involved in historical rivalries, really, and Romania doesn't want to depend on their neighboring country to improve the quality of education for the Hungarian-speaking children in Romania. Now, when these same children learn their educational content in Romanian as a medium of instruction, they also face problems, because even though these Hungarian-speaking children speak or use Romanian as a foreign language or as a second language, the educational system treats these Hungarian-speaking children as native speakers of Romanian. Now, imagine if you are an ESL learner and if you are treated like a native speaker of English, and if you are enrolled in a class that requires high expertise, definitely is going to be problematic for learning anything. So the same thing happened with these Hungarian-speaking children learning things in Romanian. Now, you might say, okay, why don't they just incorporate foreign language teaching methods and treat the children as foreign language learners or second language learners of Romanian? But that solution does not fit the nationalist agenda. They are not ready to call Romanian a foreign language in Romania. So that's a problem of the nationalist language ideology, that think that Romania has just one language, that is Romanian, and not anything else. And it is indigenous to this country, which is true, but the country has a lot of other languages, and we need to treat the students accordingly. Now, the next part of the chapter, the writer Ingrid Piller talks about a concept of educating linguistically diverse children. It's called submersion education, which is seen in GK land as well, where the instructors or the educational system uses sink or swim approach. Ever thought of learning how to swim by just jumping into the water? So in the mainstream educational system, people with linguistic diversity who speak different languages have to learn on a sink or swim basis, really. So young learners, when they enter the educational system, have to learn a new language by learning content in that language. And they have to learn new content while learning the language in which the content is delivered. Now, if you are, say, an ESL learner of English and you know no English at all, now if you are placed in a class where everything is in English, how would things go? Personally, I at first started learning Spanish, for example, and I collected a textbook in Spanish language learning. It was all in Spanish, and I could not learn anything because I do not know anything about Spanish. So This is what happens when people follow sink or swim approach in the educational system. So people are submerged in the educational system without providing additional help, and that leads to their educational underperformance. So in the US in 1974, there was a court case, Lau versus Nichols, where the parents of Mandarin-speaking children filed a case against the school system saying that their children are not receiving the equal rights. The school system argued that we have the same set of teachers, same set of teaching materials, same teaching environment, so we are treating the students equally. But the court decided that equal is not the same, because those Mandarin-speaking children cannot benefit from the school's instruction because they do not know English adequately at the beginning of their school career. So that has been a groundbreaking precedent for the school system in the US. But despite these facts, the idea that just providing everything to everybody in equal way does not ensure quality education. Throughout the world, this submersion education has been the predominant mode of educating minority children around the world. And in all places, we place a double burden on minority children, in contrast to the mainstream children. So the minority children have to learn language and content at the same time, while the mainstream children just have to learn the content only. Now, bilingual education has replaced some of these practices in different places, but still it is a big problem. The submersion education remains the most dominant mode of providing education to linguistically diverse children. Even at the university level, this submersion education system has a new set of problems. The textbook provides the example of the linguistically diverse in New Zealand universities who continue to continue to underperform because of their linguistic diversity. Now, when you are a linguistically diverse child in the educational system, the language is just one of the factors that make you face injustice in the school system. The writer Ingrid Piller cites a study from Japan where the Brazilian immigrant children were studied, especially for the reasons of their underperformance in the school system. Now, they found out these things, that not all minority children fare equally poorly. Some of them catch up with the rest of the children in 5 to 7 years. So when we're talking about that linguistically diverse children underperform in the school systems, not all of them do. And the submersion education system works for some children, but it doesn't for most. And it has other reasons to blame for that. So in this study, the researchers find out that there are a number of factors for which the Brazilian migrant children do not fare well in the Japanese educational system. The first one is the devaluation of migrant parents' educational credentials. When you immigrate to a different country, your educational qualifications from your original country often do not count, are not considered. They are not given equal values. So their parents cannot work in good jobs. So essentially, many of them land jobs in irregular job market where the jobs require low skills and they have to work longer hours and they don't have time to teach their children, or they do not earn enough money to educate their children properly. Even there is the gender discrimination as well. So female children have underperformed more than the male children in a family. So in a typical immigrant family there, it was found out that the girl child was left at home to take care of the younger siblings while the boy child was taken to the school. And surprisingly, they did not find race as a factor in there, but they found that age at the time of migration is a crucial factor. Like the younger you immigrate to a country, the better. And the generation 1.5 faces the worst outcome. 1.5 is the children who immigrate to a different country at a young age. By the time they have already learned a native language, but then when they face the educational system in a foreign country, they suffer the most. And also some of these migrant families face involuntary transnationalism. I mean, they move back and forth between two countries because of their jobs, because of their families, and that harms their children's educational outcomes as well. Sometimes the local context of reception also played a factor. Like, in some communities, there are some community support systems that actually help people with linguistic diversity, people who come from outside a particular country. And in some places, you will not have this kind of community support. And also, finally, the parental proficiency in the dominant language also is a big factor in deciding whether the children will do better in the school system or not. Ingrid Pillar finally talks about another tool for linguistic injustice in the school system, which is testing. Testing is essentially a measure against linguistic diversity. There is an ever-increasing focus on the standardized assessment, and all those standardized testing systems really treat everyone as the monolingual native speaker of a particular language. And it has been seen in the British examples. They have the British statutory framework where the motive is that the children will come out as English only, and they do not assess the students' learning outcomes in other languages. In the US, the writer provides an example. I will elaborate that on the next page, that the testing system actually is setting the refugee children up for failure in the educational system. One example is the case of a student named Oscar who failed his 5th grade test that is originally designed for mainstream children. In Australia, a similar case is observed where the indigenous children are failing in the Northern Territories of Australia because of a standardized test called NAPLAN, which is designed for the first language speakers of English, but the indigenous children in that territory speak Creole, kind of English-based Creole as a language. They have a different variety of English in there. So they are essentially the foreign language learners of, or EFL learners of English. And many of the contents produced in that NAPLAN test do not feature in their own local culture. So again, another standardized test sets the children up for failure in Australia as well. So see the case of the testing against linguistic diversity in the US in a little bit more detail here. So the writer talks about the case of a refugee child, Oscar, who was a grade 5 student in a school in Vermont. And he recently came to the area, and despite the fact that he is new to the country, new to English, and new to formal schooling, he had to take the same nationally standardized grade 5 reading test as all the other kids his age around the country who had grown up in the USA and spoken English all their lives will take. So as part of the test, Oscar needed 20 minutes to read a passage on Neil Armstrong landing his Eagle spacecraft on the moon. It should have taken, the writer says, him 5 minutes, but Oscar was determined, reading out loud to himself. The first test question asked whether the passage was fact or fiction. Oscar explained his reasoning to his teacher. "Oh, Mrs. Irwin, men don't go on the moon. Men don't go on the back of eagles. This is not true." So he interpreted that Neil Armstrong's passage as work of fiction because the fact that the Americans landed on the moon was not familiar to Oscar as a child. So he knew the meanings of the words and the passage, but he lacked the cultural understanding, and that's how he failed that test. So this is just an example, a specific concrete case of how linguistically diverse or culturally diverse children have been set up for failure in the educational system.